Okay, so back to today. Today's speaker taught German, Spanish, English, and drama for 35 years. She's done historical interpretation and program directing at the Plymouth Historical Museum, and she's now a freelance speaker and script chairperson for the Barefoot Production Community Theater. When researching historical figures like Eleanor Roosevelt, she finds aspects that interest her the most, and then she sets out in her speeches to interest others. Today, in this case, looking at Eleanor Roosevelt's life from the view of a tabloid headline. So she will speak to us today about the sometimes scandalous life of Eleanor Roosevelt. Please help me welcome Anna Lopez.
Can you show me how to take this off? Oops. Okay, just 1 second. Got to shut my phone off, so. No one calls, but they probably would right in the middle. Okay, first, since I don't have a problem with hearing, but my husband insists I do, if anybody can't hear, raise their hand, because if I go away from the mic, then it's like this. I can project, but then by the end of the speech, I don't have a voice left. So if you can't hear, rather than going, I can't hear you, just raise your hand. I tried to put the headlines about where you can see them. They were a lot smaller than that, because the last couple of times I've done it has been inside in a nice cozy little room. Then I realized that this was a big place, and you were going to have to see them. So I invited my husband to take all the headlines and put them on a larger form. So you can thank him for that. Yeah. Why Eleanor Roosevelt? Well, I had put this in my intro that when I was smaller, I used to hear my mother, when the radio would come on, talk about that woman. That woman is talking again. Why doesn't she just shut up? I'm going, which woman is this? Must be fascinating if it makes my mother so mad. Yeah. But then she talked about, I never met my grandmother, but her mother-in-law, and she referred to that lady as that woman, you know. So, what is the connection? I want you to know that my first name is Anna. My grandmother, my mother's mother-in-law's name was Anna. And Eleanor Roosevelt's first name was Anna. Unfortunately, I can't ask my mother, why did you call me Anna? You know, she never really ever said to me, that girl, well, as a matter of fact, she did. But anyway, I started looking into Eleanor Roosevelt simply because my mother didn't like her. And I thought, well, somebody like that's got to be good. And so I started researching her. And it came to me as I did research, the more I did, that had she lived today, she would have been the National Enquirer's and the Globe's breadwinner. Because there's so many things that happened in her life that would be in the headlines. Now, I know some of you ask me, quite a few, did I spell Eleanor's name wrong over there? It says Erlenor. And you know how you combine Brad Pitt with Angelina Jolie, and you combine all these names, Brangelina, you know, they make them as one. Well, I'm going to tell you about halfway through the speech about Erlenor, Earl Miller, and Eleanor Roosevelt. My opinion, and from what I've read, and I keep reading more and more things that make me think I'm correct. Anyway, let's start out. Eleanor was born 1876, 1886, in the Victorian era. Okay, and that's important to remember because of the way she wrote letters. And in 1978, somebody said anybody over 50, and that was in 1978, wouldn't understand what these very effusive letters meant Just because you told somebody, I love you, I can't wait to see you again, put my arms about you, didn't necessarily mean you were fooling around. Except when we get to that one. Anyway, after the last time I talked about Eleanor Roosevelt, I assumed, that's what happens when you go over 70, I guess, I assumed everybody knew who Eleanor Roosevelt was. Of course they knew all the things that she did, all the good things, the UN, being a representative to the UN, working on human rights, her radio show, all the magazine articles that she wrote, her column, working for the Union, knowing Walter Reuther, working on the protest lines and the rest. But I found out not everybody knows that. And then I found out, you want to know how really old you are? I went into Kinko's to get some of these pictures laminated, and it was a nice young man, about 25, and I said, you know who this is, don't you? No, is she important? Yes, I'm giving a speech on her. Oh, and then I told him who she was, and he said, oh yeah, I seem to remember hearing about her. So, I feel like maybe I should be giving speeches to people 25 and under and letting them know who this is. Okay. Eleanor's father was Teddy Roosevelt's youngest brother. And he had several brothers. Most of them had a drinking problem. We'll get to that in a minute. Anna Hall, her mother, was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, as were her sisters. And Eleanor, of course, was a disappointment to her mother. She wasn't beautiful. But that didn't come until she was about 5 when she decided to tell her that. Their first trip together as a family was to Europe. Eleanor was 3. Not too far outside New York, the ship was hit. They had to abandon ship. Eleanor was handed off, because she wasn't with her parents, she was with a nanny, handed off to strangers on the boat, taken back into New York, reunited with her parents. You can imagine, 3 years old, she was traumatized. What do her parents do? What would you do? Oh, Eleanor, how are you? Is everything okay? Oh my goodness. No, they got a hold of an aunt and uncle and said, listen, could you watch Eleanor? Because we just rebooked our ship to go back to Europe. So they left Eleanor and went off for a month to Europe. So we have our first headline. Yeah? Parents abandon small child after horrific boat crash. All right. Well, let's try vacation again. This time they're going to Italy. And Eleanor is about 5. She turned 6 while she was there. The sailing went smoothly this time, but the vacation did not. Her dad not only was addicted to alcohol, he also was taking laudanum because they thought he had epilepsy. They weren't sure. Took laudanum, opium, and he was addicted to those too. And so he went on a drinking binge and was uncontrollable, so they sent him off to an asylum in France. Eleanor's mother was just prostrate with migraines and depression. I can't take this, I really can't. What to do? Eleanor used to sit by her side, rub her temples when she had migraines to try and make her feel better. That wasn't enough. Have to do something with you, Eleanor. We'll send you to an Italian monastery for school for a year while I stay and get over my depression. Now you realize I am putting my own spin on her mother, but the stuff I've read, it's all true. Anyway, so she ends up a year in a monastery, going to school. Now, if I'm correct, this next one says, socialite demeans homely daughter. Well, I don't know. My mother used to say to me, the one who named me Anna, after Eleanor and her mother-in-law, used to say to me, when I asked her, I said, Mom, am I pretty? I was like 7 or 8. And my mother was very blunt, very honest, and said, you have a classic look. I'm 7, just call me pretty. A classic look. So I understand how Eleanor must have felt when her mother, kind of cold as she was, dismissed her looks as ugly. Yeah, she made fun of her mouth, her teeth, which everyone knows she had like, trouble with buck teeth, and she had a weak chin. And it didn't help that she was painfully shy and awkward. I'm not sure which came first, her mother saying, well, you better develop intelligence and some wit, because you're sure not going to make it with your looks. I think she was 6, or 7. That's when they got back, yeah. And then she said, you better learn to develop some witty conversational pieces, because otherwise you won't make it anywhere. Now, her mother would talk harshly to her, and I never knew that this was really bad. Eleanor said it was awful. Not only did she talk harshly to her in front of visitors, but the worst thing was that she talked harshly to her in front of the servants. You don't do that, not in front of the servants. And Eleanor was really, really upset. She was so upset that she would sneak into the kitchen and get sugar lumps and eat sugar lumps, which I'm sure were not good for her teeth. She said later she wasn't sure which felt better, eating the sugar lumps or sneaking into the kitchen and taking them because she wasn't supposed to. What about her dad? You know, you've heard Teddy Roosevelt was charming. Well, his younger brother was charming also. She, no surprise, adored her dad. Let me take this one down. Just as I say, her dad adored her. They had this warmth, and they had a very loving relationship, and she was what she wanted to be, the focal point of somebody's adoration and love. That was her dad. He wrote her poetry. She kept every piece of it. He wrote her love-filled letters. She kept every letter, and later in her life, she published these in a collected work of these. He would write her and say, Little Nell, because that's what he would call her, my little Nell, I'm going to come home and I'm going to take you away, and we're going to travel. And she lived for those letters. One day he came home. Oh, where was he all this time? Somewhere in his life, he got very well acquainted with one of the Irish maids in the house, and he had a son. Nobody in his wife's family recognized the son. Teddy Roosevelt did, and told the boy to call him uncle. So this gave me another plus for Teddy Roosevelt. But nobody else did. I don't even know if Eleanor's dad did. I'm not sure. And he spent a lot of time, of course, in his clubs, in the bars, and with his mistresses. So I don't know how much time he really spent with Eleanor. But one day he said, okay, Eleanor, my little Nell, I'm going to take you to my club, the Knickerbocker Club. Oh, she got all dressed up. She, this is great, 7. This is great. Daddy's going to take me out. So they go to his club, and he says, okay, you're going to have to sit outside here and wait. I'm going to go inside for a few minutes. So she's sitting there, and she's waiting. My daddy's inside there. I'm waiting for my daddy. And I'm waiting for my daddy. And I'm waiting for my daddy, and it's getting dark. And I'm still waiting for my daddy. Somebody comes out from the club and says, little girl, who are you? I'm Eleanor Roosevelt. My daddy's inside. Yeah, okay. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get you a carriage and take you home. Oh, but where was her dad? He had gone into the club, he'd gotten drunk, and his friends had poured him into a carriage and sent him home. He completely forgot about her. So, perfect headline. Pardon me?
It was 8 hours, she said.
Yep.
Because I read the first time.
Yes, drunk and abandoned, little Nell on club steps. Okay, but that didn't mean that she didn't love him. You know, she was 8 when her mother died of diphtheria, and she admitted in later life that she didn't really miss her mother and she didn't love her. And she said, maybe that's terrible, but it's the truth. And if you read how her mother treated her, you say, yeah, I can believe that. Her father died when she was 10, and she was devastated. And she learns much later that he had died at the house of his mistress. Now, there are 2 different stories that I read. Pick one. He died at the house of his mistress, or his mistress couldn't put up with him because he was getting so drunk and sent him to the asylum. No, I'm sorry, his mistress couldn't put up with him because he tried to jump out the window and when he was drunk, and so he ended up in an asylum. I don't know if they're sure where he was when he died. No one from the family went to the funeral, at least, you know, the aunts, and they wouldn't let Eleanor go because it was such a scandalous death. So she didn't learn till later what had actually happened. What's going to happen to her? Where's she going to go? She's 10 years old. This awkward, shy, ugly child. I have to see what that's, oh, yes. Yes, the drunken uncles, oh yeah. She goes to her grandmother Hall's house. Her grandmother Hall was not expecting this at all. Did not look forward to raising a granddaughter. Now, a granddaughter that was good looking, maybe, but not this one. Her uncles, I told you, were drinkers. And they would go into town and they would drink, and then sometimes they got hold of guns and they'd come back and the house was locked and they'd shoot out windows so they could get in. And then once they did get in, Eleanor was about 14, tall, dark blonde hair, blue eyes. I mean, she still hadn't blossomed yet, but she still was a young girl. And I'm not saying anything happened. However, the grandmother decided it would be better to lock her doors so the uncles wouldn't get in to her room. This couldn't go on. It just couldn't. So the aunts got together, pooled their money, and decided to send her away. So the drunken uncles were kept away from her permanently. Oh, where are we going to send her? Oh, let's send her to England. Why not? That's far enough away. Allenswood, which was a boarding school. And when she goes to Allenswood, she meets Madame Souvestre, who is this radical feminist. Rush Limbaugh would have loved talking about her. A feminazi is what she was. And she said, women can change things, women can do it, women have rights, women should fight the status quo. And Eleanor, 15, 16, 17, is going, I'm doing this. I love it. She took her on trips. Now, Eleanor was bilingual. She spoke French and English. Why was she bilingual? Because as early as 5, her mother decided, nannies are good. Get a nanny, a French-speaking nanny. Didn't speak any English, so in order to survive, Eleanor had to learn French. So it's one of the reasons, well, I guess there's a plus there, she's bilingual. And as a language teacher, I think that's very good that she was bilingual. So anyway, they went to Paris, and Madame Sylvestre took them, traveled around, taught her all these things, but she had to come home because it was her debutante season. Ah yes, ugly duckling becomes a swan. Now remember when everyone thought when she left, she was kind of this awkward young girl, not good looks, I personally thought she wasn't bad looking at all, and if you look at some of her younger pictures that are around, I think she wasn't bad looking, really. 5'11". She has an imposing figure, 5'11". Had this dark blonde hair, real long blonde hair, blue eyes. And she came home, went through her debutante season. She had to be presented to society, as all the girls who were affluent were. And she had blossomed. She could talk. When people started to notice her at some of these debutante parties, and she could talk to people, and she was very pleasant. She couldn't take it, though. She said it was too confining, and it was just too ordered, and she didn't like that. And what was she going to do with what Madame Silvestre had taught her? I know what I'll do. Much to the chagrin of her family, I will go down to the Rivington settlement, down in the Bowery, and help out. So she took the streetcar and the tram down there, and she decided, what would she do? She would teach calisthenics, and I'm sorry, 5'11", doing jumping jacks, just something about that makes me laugh, I don't know. And dancing. Here are these people who are poor, let's dance. And she did teach them literature. One day, we got Eleanor becoming a swan. Well, who's going to notice this swan? Who do you think? There was a young man going to Harvard, and his name was Franklin Roosevelt, okay? Now everyone says, wait a minute, her name was Roosevelt, his name's Roosevelt. What is this? Oh, they're cousins. Oh, cousins getting married. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at the background, way back, the end of the 1600s, a Dutch family named Van Rosen, R-O-S-E-N, Velt, came over. That family had two brothers, two sons. One son's family started a line of Roosevelts. The other son's family started a line of Roosevelts. 5 generations down is where they are. 5th cousins they were, so they weren't that much related. 5th cousins. And she was 5th cousin once removed. If somebody wants to explain that to me, fine. Okay, cousins. Yeah. When she was down at the settlement house, before she met Franklin, she was at the settlement house, and she went into the homes of the poor to see what their working conditions were. She went to the factories to see what the conditions were. She marched on picket lines. Of course, her family's going crazy. Do something with, find this person, somebody, take them away. They're embarrassing us. Well, then she meets Franklin, and we already did the socialite goes slumming. At least that's what her family thought it was. Oh, okay. Yes. So Franklin decides, wow, here's an intelligent, not bad-looking woman, and I know her because he was kind of shy himself. And she likes conversation, she's intelligent, she can talk about different things. I think we've got something going here. Let's tell Mom. So everybody, at least my age, I think, knows about Sarah Delano Roosevelt. You think that Anna Hall, Eleanor's mother, was bad. Sarah was the mother-in-law from hell. Thank you. Thank you very much. Was that? Okay. Perfect match. They wanted to get married. Sarah didn't necessarily want this to happen because she had picked out somebody else for him. And they said, oh, no, we're going to be engaged. Well, Franklin and Eleanor, tell you what. Why don't you keep this a secret. Keep it our little secret for 18 months. That's a year and a half. Keep it a secret. Can you imagine getting engaged or engaged? This is great. Now just shut up about it and don't say anything. Year and a half. Oh, okay, because Eleanor's like, looking for people to love her, and this woman might turn out to be a mother, who knows, that she never had. And she says, okay, we'll keep it a secret. Well, Sarah had other plans. Sarah said, okay, you're going to keep it a secret. Tell you what I'm going to do. Franklin, come here. I'm sending you on a 5-week cruise by yourself. Then she got to work and tried to find him a job in London. I know. Anyway, well, too bad. They got married anyway. Well, what kind of mother-in-law was she? She said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to buy 2 houses, 2 townhouses right next to each other with adjoining doors and hallways so I can live right next door to you. Oh, yes, lucky. And Eleanor, I know you haven't had a lot of experience with this, so tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick out the drapes and the furniture and the dishes and the silverware and the servants. And Eleanor says, oh, okay, because she wasn't too sure how to handle this. She wasn't too sure of herself. Then, from 1906 to 1916, she had 6 kids. I know, I counted it out. She was pregnant practically all the time. She had 6 kids, and she always said she has 6, and I had somebody once say, oh no, she only had 5. Well, anybody who ever said to Eleanor Roosevelt, you have 5 children, right? She'd say, no, I have 6. Because one son named Franklin, she had a second son she named Franklin too. One son that she had, named Franklin died when he was 7 months old. So but she always remembered him. She always made sure that everybody knew that for 7 months he was a person. Eleanor is not the best mother in the world. What kind of example had she had? She was very inconsistent. She'd be loving one minute, and then she would be, get out of my hair the next. I don't want to talk to you. And she just could be demanding, and then she wouldn't even care what you did. So the kids were not too sure what to do. So maybe it was good that Sarah helped her out. But then Eleanor decided, I am going to hire a secretary myself, not my mother-in-law, me. Because I've got all these things I'm doing. Franklin was with the Navy, Secretary of the Navy, and Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and she was busy with the kids. So I'm going to hire a secretary. And you all know who she hired, Lucy Mercer, who was 6, 7 years younger than she was. So it makes her about 22 or so. Lucy Mercer comes in, very nice woman, beautiful woman, from the pictures I've seen. And she helps as social secretary for Eleanor, but she also helped out with Franklin. Yeah, helped out. And we all know it well. Okay. Oh, what happened? Yes, he comes home from Europe, and she's so happy to see him, and she runs in and she says, oh, Franklin, I'm so glad you're home. And they take the trunks upstairs, and she starts unpacking them. And she comes across a packet of letters. And the part that always got me when I read about this is in Franklin's trunk, a packet of letters tied up with a ribbon. There's something about tying up letters with a ribbon from your secretary that just doesn't flow well with me. She gets these letters and she reads them, and they're all from Lucy Mercer while he was away. So she confronts him and she says, I'll give you a divorce. Sarah comes in and says, "We don't divorce in this family." She said, "Well, Franklin, by the way, wanted a divorce." He said, "Fine, this is great." He probably would have married Lucy Mercer had he had the chance. She said, "Okay, no, but I'll stay married on 2 conditions. One, that you cut off all relationship with Lucy Mercer forever, from now on. Second, you never come to my bed again." So Franklin says, "Okay, what can I say?" So they end up having a political marriage. And I'm sure that you can think of a present-day couple who has a marriage like that. Okay. He builds her own house, not too far from Hyde Park, called Valkill. And that's where she makes her formal residency from then on. Then, not all Roosevelts are nice, as we found out. Alice Roosevelt, and you've heard of the Alice Blue gown. That was the Alice Blue. Alice was the wild child, the wild mean child of Teddy Roosevelt. She was very spoiled, very good looking too. She had had her eyes on Franklin. She thought, "Look at me, I'm gorgeous." And he chose that ugly person over me? Terrible. So she made it her job to say nasty things. And she insisted to anybody she could talk to, she could not understand how he could be so interested in somebody so ugly. She declared FDR to be 9 parts mush and 1 part Eleanor. Okay, I can understand she's a little upset. You know, the pretty girl does not get the good-looking guy, right? But she was really cruel also. One of the quotes, and I got to read this. He's running for governor of New York, and then he was running for president. And when he was running for president, she said, because he'd already had polio, "He is crippled, and now he wants to cripple the country." Yes, mean. But Eleanor kind of turned the tables, because her first inaugural gown was blue, and it was referred to as Eleanor Blue. And so from then on in the press, they called it not Alice Blue, but Eleanor Blue. And I thought, what a subtle way to get Alice off the stage, take over her color. Anyway, yeah. Okay, now, so much. Oh, and if you ever want to read anything interesting, get some books on Alice Alice. She is a trip. Telling you. Oh, what does this say? First Lady Secretary and a loudmouth drunk. All right. She needed a secretary. So what does she have? She has a secretary, Malvina Tommy Thompson. Loved to drink, loved to smoke cigars, and Eleanor loved it. She didn't like people who drank necessarily, because FDR liked to drink, and he liked to see other people drink, and he tried to feed them more and more liquor so he could see how stupid they acted, which I didn't think was too nice, but anyway. She thought that Malvina was just great. Then she met another person, another reporter named Lorena Hickok. And there are a couple pictures. Is it there? Good. I want you to look at Lorena, and then the two of them, they were traveling. Lorena was a lesbian, and at the time, everyone decided, well, if you're a lesbian, if you hang around with them, then you must be a lesbian too. And she used to have people, women livers and lesbians, hang out at Valkill, so of course she has to be a lesbian, right? Lorena was in love with Eleanor. I mean, she really was. They would go to parties, and she would call her Eleanor dearest, Eleanor darling, and all sorts of things like this. And so everybody kind of really wondered about what was going on. Eleanor in the lesbian circles. I don't know if I have that. Does that say? Oh, yes. Well, just because they talked about women's rights and just because she felt comfortable with them and she could talk about different things, everyone decided, okay, all the lesbians are meeting up at Valkill. And that was in the paper too, and of course that really rattled one person that was in the government, and that happened to be J. Edgar Hoover, but we'll get to him later. I'm just going to read you something, and when I read this separately, I thought probably the same thing you people may think, I don't know. But then I got a book out. There's a whole book of letters that Eleanor wrote to her friends. She wrote some of the same stuff to her daughter and to her friends that she wrote to these people. So who knows what she really meant. They wrote to each other. This is Lorena and Eleanor, who also traveled a lot together. This is what they wrote to each other about every day, and this is a sample of the things that they wrote. Eleanor, I felt a little as though a part of me was leaving tonight. You have grown to be so much a part of my life that it's empty without you. Lorena, back to Eleanor. I love you deeply, tenderly, and my arms feel very empty. Again, I wish I could lie down beside you tonight and take you in my arms. Since you are not here, I'll have to kiss your picture. In a couple of letters, Eleanor tried to explain to Lorena, I wish that you could have been married or had a love of your own, because I can't give you the love that you need. It's not the same. So make what you want of that. I don't know. Somebody made a point that she wrote about having cuddly kissing times with Lorena. Ooh, must be something happening there. But you read the whole book of letters, you find out that the letters that she wrote to Sarah Delano before she, got out from under her influence, she said, I can't wait to have kissing, cuddly times with you. This is with her mother-in-law. So it's a matter of, you have to understand the Victorian age, because she grew up in it, was influenced by this, and writing was certainly not 17 characters in a Twitter. It's not quite the same. I can't imagine what the Twitter world would be like with these. Love ya, you too, see ya, okay, anyway. Her daughter, however, when she came across some of these letters and she talked to Eleanor, and she says, if that woman is in love with you, tell her to snap out of it. Because Lorena was just like, she was in love with Eleanor. Their friendship cooled, and it might be because Eleanor got so busy. Oh, I forgot to say that when did Eleanor kind of kick Sarah to the curb? That's her mother-in-law. With the divorce thing, she came into her own right after okay, I'll agree to this, but leave me alone from now on. So she got to be more and more independent. And as she moved around more and everything, she needed a bodyguard, FDR thought. So, no. Thank you. Oh, First Lady involved with bodyguard. You notice the one over here. If you have a chance, I want you to look at that. It says Eleanor. That's Earl Miller and Eleanor together. Eleanor. These pictures, I found these pictures. You can get them on the internet. I have not been able to find the film. There's a film that shows Eleanor sitting there with Earl, and it also shows the movies. They made home movies. Don't tell me it was platonic. Well, maybe it was, but I don't know. He was a boxer. He left home when he was 12, had to make his own way, went in the Navy, boxed for the Navy. He is also a horseman, and then he became a state trooper, and that's when FDI hired him to guard Eleanor, because she was traveling a lot. And his buddies used to kid him and say, "Oh, how's that old lady?" Because he was 30 and she was about 44. Okay, think Demi Moore, Ashton Kutcher. Okay, maybe not quite the same, but I like to think Eleanor's, nothing against Demi Moore, but I think Eleanor's is a little bit more level-headed, I don't know. She took interest in him and he devoted his life to her. And it was nice to be number one in somebody's life. Remember her dad? She was number one for a couple of years anyway. He helped her train her police dog. He also taught her how to drive better, taught her how to shoot, and he also taught her how to swim. She's in her 40s, she didn't swim. Well, one time her Uncle Teddy, when they were up at the lake, decided she should swim, and he gets his boys to pick her up and dump her in the water. Well, she was terrified of water from then on. So she didn't learn to swim until Earl taught her how to swim. One movie, and if you could never find it on the internet, look it up. They're doing this movie. Oh, before I do the movie, let me tell you about the picture over here. She's sitting with her hand on his thigh, and people who were there said they always had their hands on each other. That's just friendship, I'm sure. But look at how, I mean, it's on his thigh. I thought, well, okay, it's a picture. Maybe it slipped. Then in the movie, the whole movies, they are really quite close. And when there's one movie where he's dressed up as a pirate, and she is a damsel in distress. I mean, she's 5'11". At 5'8", I never felt like I was a damsel, you know. So 5'11", I can imagine. And he comes rushing in and scoops her up and saves her from the pirates or whatever had taken her off, you know, in this movie they were making. You look at that and you start to wonder, too, if something was going on. But the important thing you might say is that he made her feel like a woman. Now, what other proof could there be? At this time, just coincidentally, she cut her hair, bobbed her hair, and started wearing makeup. Why would she suddenly do that? I mean, you know, you get your hairstyle, put some makeup on, it's not for yourself. Well, usually it's not for yourself. But, you know, it makes me wonder. And you may read, he's married. He was married. He was married twice. The second time he married his wife's cousin, which I thought was a little tacky. But then he said later, the only reason he married was to stop rumors about him and Eleanor. So, you know, what a guy. Hi, honey, want to get married? I want to stop a rumor. I don't think that was really nice, but, you know, who knows. Anyway, then the third time, Eleanor decided he really needed to be married. She used to talk to him about these things, and so she arranged for him to meet this woman, and he got married for the third time in 1941. But they got divorced. And in this divorce, his wife, Earl Miller's wife, sued for divorce and named Eleanor as co-respondent. Why? Because she had a packet of letters. Remember the packet of letters that she found in the, she found a packet of letters that Eleanor had written to Earl. And apparently there was enough in those letters to make her think something was going on. Well, her son said, "Mommy, I'll represent you, but you have to be honest with me. Did anything happen?" Oh, I'm sorry, I'm still on Earl. Did anything happen? And she said, "I'll tell you straight, I love Earl, but nothing like you're implying ever happened." Now, maybe that's the truth. However, later I read that one of the reasons she wanted this whole thing to go away was it was going to be bad for her son's political careers. So I don't know. Her son later read the letters, when they were in the suit, and said they were very effusive. Look that word up. Effusive. I mean, I know you know what it means. But, effusive, and now I've told you, you can read things both ways. Was she just being really friendly, or were they being really friendly? Who knows? Here's the other thing that makes me think there was an Eleanor connection. There are over 3,000 letters, I think there's over 3,000 letters that are on file that she wrote to all these people that they've kept. She wrote to Earl until the day she died. He wrote to her. Ask me how many letters survive. 0. None from her, none from him. And the feeling is that the son, after he saw the letters and got them from the third wife, either packed them away or burned them. And the same thing with Earl. Earl's family may have found the letters, but whatever, they're gone. So I thought that was interesting for a friendship that was so warm that nothing was left. But people still speculate whether anything happened or not. Her son said that he felt that possibly was the one true love of her life was Earl Miller. So I'd like to think it was. Besides, he was kind of cute. Okay. Oh yes, okay. Eleanor, just not only did she drive J. Edgar Hoover crazy, she drove the Ku Klux Klan crazy. She wanted to work with the freedom camps down in Tennessee, Kentucky, in the South, to learn how to fight for civil rights and to protest. And she decided to go down to Tennessee to meet with one of these groups. And the FBI said, well, actually, Reed, J. Edgar Hoover, said, "We can't protect you." And she turned to them and said, "Well, thanks, I didn't ask you." So she went down. She's met by this 68-year-old woman. They get in the car, and between them, they have a gun on the seat. That's their protection. And they drive out to the middle of the forest where they're having this meeting with this freedom group to learn about protesting. She gets back to the train and gets home. So far, nothing happens. But that's not enough for the Ku Klux Klan. They decide she was responsible for causing all the trouble about the lynching bill. There was a lynching bill that was in the Senate, Costigan and Wagner, I think it was, 1934, that wanted to make lynching a federal crime. FDR was all for it, but he didn't come out and say publicly because he didn't want to lose a Southern vote. So lynching stayed legal. And they blamed Eleanor for these. They were called Eleanor clubs. And they were formed, this is in the South, they were formed by servants, black servants of white people, and they would do a slowdown, a work slowdown, or they would protest what work they had to do. And then they talked about Eleanor Tuesdays, where African American men would go down the street and knock down white women. Whether this actually happened or not, I don't know, but this was part of the press at the time. And I want you to know, in case anybody wanted to find a reason for the riots in Detroit in 1943, whose fault do you think that was? You got it. It was Eleanor's fault, of course. So, she was blamed for a lot of things, and she got a lot of press that was negative. They never did collect their money, of course, but a lot of people tried to get it. Oh, now I don't know, I read a lot before I ever came across this. This is Eleanor herself, called these her Griselda Modes. And she would become really cold-eyed, quiet, wouldn't talk, just like get away from me type of mood. And she didn't know why. They just came across her. One time when she was babysitting her grandchildren, nice grandma, little kids crying. And she turns to him and says, "Go to the bathroom and sit in the bathtub till your tears dry up." Griselda was visiting, okay? The best one was, she was in one of these moods, and FDR is complaining about the food. There was a woman chef at the White House. And he's complaining about the food, he can't eat it. You know, why don't we fire the chef and we'll get a new one? And Eleanor said, "Oh, sure, I'll speak to the chef." She goes out, calls the chef over, and she says, "You have a job here to the end of the presidency." And the chef stayed for 12 years. So the Griselda Modes could be helpful, you know, depending. Okay, I may have to, I have a couple more. Do I have time? 5 minutes? Okay. Oh yeah, sure, go on, keep going. I already took a couple off. J. Edgar Hoover, of course, I'll go fast over this one, thought that Eleanor was a communist because she wanted equality for blacks, she wanted equality for women. Can you imagine what she'd be like today with the equal pay for women and men? Ooh, love it if she were here. Anyway, she heard how the blacks were being treated in the army, and so she said, she heard about the Tuskegee Airmen, and they weren't letting the black air group, they weren't letting them fly. So Eleanor says, "I can do that." She goes down there, says, "Hi, I'm Eleanor Roosevelt. Take me up in your plane." "Oh, you're the first lady. I don't know if we can." "Sure we can. We can go up." So one of the pilots takes her up in his plane, comes back down, and not too many months later, guess who's flying in the war? The Tuskegee Airmen. I mean, she was, for a girl who was awkward, shy, quiet, she really came out of her shell. Of course, we already know that she marched and did all of those things. And of course, if you were with the unions, you were a communist. We all know that. You know, those unions. Okay, at least in those days. This is the one that I think is hilarious. First lady caught in hotel room with young protege. And it didn't help that in one of the papers, Joe Lash was referred to as college hot cutie. I saw pictures of him. He wasn't a hot cutie, not like Earl. Come on. Anyway, she was sitting in the hearings they were having. They figured that the group that he was with, and in congressional hearings, he was with a college youth group that he was like the Young Americans or something like that. They figured that's a communist group, and so he's in front of congressional hearings. Eleanor is listening, but she's at the back of the chambers. They start really laying into Joe Lash. So she picks up her knitting, goes to the front row, and sits there so that they wouldn't attack him. And then afterwards, she talks to him, and then she gives him a ride home, and then they strike up a friendship, and they become friends. He goes to a hotel in Chicago. She's going to be there too, and they have adjoining rooms. Maybe that's all they had. I don't know. Anyway, they had the same sense of humor. They liked the same things, and so they liked to talk. He had complained of a headache after dinner, and remember I told you she used to rub her mother's temples when she had headaches. So she thinks nothing of it. She goes into his room, and he's got this headache, and he's lying down, and she's rubbing his temples, and they're talking, and the rest. J. Edgar Hoover had gotten permission and got the U.S. Army to bug these hotel rooms and made tapes. And they turned them into J. Edgar Hoover, and he put them in his Eleanor file, which was huge, under sexual affairs. If she had all the affairs that J. Edgar Hoover thought she had, this was a busy lady. Anyway. Okay. We had to leave to come over here from way over in Plymouth, and so the last two headlines didn't get it to the large print. One of them is, "Final Betrayal. Daughter brings mistress to dying father." Now remember one of the conditions of her divorce, never see Lucy Mercer again? Depending on who you read, and I happen to believe the ones that say they got together not soon after that, she saw him all during his presidency. She was down with him in Warm Springs. And Anna, that's Eleanor's daughter, made sure that Eleanor never came down to visit him at Warm Springs because Lucy Mercer was there. And when Eleanor hears that FDR had died, she goes down, and she's all concerned, and then she finds out that Lucy Mercer had been with him when he died. And she took a real long time to forgive her daughter. She took a real long time to forgive her daughter for betraying her. But there's a picture of her with her daughter after this where they are smiling and they do make up. The last one, and it doesn't really, this is, when FDR died, Eleanor said, well, I guess my public life is to an end, which I think is hilarious now, because President Truman said, okay, I want you to be representative to the UN, and she did, and she worked on human rights and everything, then she traveled around, and one of the people she traveled with was a Dr. Gurevich, and they went to the Taj Mahal. Now, the Taj Mahal is for lovers, right? So there we go, the woman is in her 50s, 60s, and another love affair, Eleanor at Taj Mahal with Dr. Gurevich. Give me a break. I mean, she did like him, but come on. She was also linked to Bernard Baruch, for heaven's sakes. Anyway, I just want to leave you with this, if I can find it. If not, I have to memorize it. This is what I think is perfect to end this with Eleanor. This is a quote from her, and since we have tea, "A woman is like a tea bag. She doesn't know how good she is going to be until she is in hot water." And Eleanor Roosevelt was one good cup of tea.